Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu salam ala Rasulullah. We continue reading from Imam Al-Ghazali's On Disciplining the Soul, Kitab Riyadat al-Nafs. We're still reading from the translator's introduction, an excellent introduction by T.J. Winter, Abdul Hakim Murad. We are on page 57 of the introduction, Latin numerals, and the very last thing that we have read was a reference to Mawardi's use of moderation, tawassut, a word which would shortly be employed by Al-Ghazali. And this is in a note that a debt to Aristotle too is visible in Mawardi's frequent reference to the principle of the mean, which he expresses in terms of moderation. This is, of course, considered corresponding to Aristotle's concept that does appear in Nicomachean ethics. Now, a word about wasatiyya. This is not a method like it does exist in Islam. It does exist in the Quran. وكذلك جعلناكم أمة وسطا ولتكونوا شهداء على الناس. The being Ummah Wasat is taking that middle path to adopt the concept of the mean, the wasat, the wasatiyya. It is not a mathematical like carrying the stick from the middle. No, it depends on the context. The problem is that within the last decade or so, the concept became kind of a lukewarm political trend, whereby there are those who advocated wasatiyya, but they did not insist on as a political position. But the problem is that when you have an occupation, what kind of wasatiyya you are advocating, if you don't insist on, if it's not really stemming from the Islamic worldview, if it does not insist on your people's rights and primarily to end the occupation, then it would probably be considered kind of a sellout. So one should be true to one's faith, to one's people, if you will, national aspirations. The same thing could be applied to Sufism. Sufism should not be understood and as an apolitical state, spiritual state. The first responders, those who fought against the colonial powers in North Africa and the Middle East and Sudan and In many places in the Islamic world, the Sufi orders were at the forefront in the 19th century and early 20th century. They fought against the colonial powers, and it continued to be the case for a long time. We continue reading. The Arabs could count themselves fortunate in that the differences between the systems of Plato and Aristotle, and also that of the Stoics, had already to a large extent been resolved for them by the later Greek thinkers, some of whom also added a more recognizably religious dimension. Yet the underlying incompatibility Greek and between Greek and Semitic thought continued to cause discomfort, namely the inability of the Greeks to recognize a true concept of duty. Why calling it a Semitic thought? If it's really the Semites as a group of people, um, the Semites as the languages, or is it about the even if you call them Abrahamic? And this one inserts a footnote to explain what one means by this. For the Greeks, a man's conduct was determined by his character, as this has been developed by education and maintained by bodily health. And since only the wealthy aristocracy could expect to enjoy this, it was a notion which supported the conception of a natural elite. The Islamic ideal was rather different. While it is true that some men are born better than others, the Muslim stress on self discipline aided by a God who is indifferent to man's outer circumstances implied that true virtue may be attained whatever one's stations in life. But the question is God indifferent to man's outer circumstances? Where is the divine will? Where is divine allotment for for humanity, for particular person? Such contradictions, which had been only imperfectly resolved by earlier thinkers, found in the Shafi'i intelligentsia, men equipped both with sufficient openness of mind to learn from philosophic ethics and enough Muslim commitment to attempt a resolution. Ghazali's achievement in the realm of ethics was not the conversion of the ulama to Greek thought, but rather the long delayed but very sophisticated conversion of Plato and Aristotle to Islam. Summary of the present work: the book of disciplining the soul, refining the character, and curing the sickness of the heart. Mind you, at one point the translator would make reference to the second book, which is translated published in the same volume, which is on breaking the two desires, Kitab Kasr Shahwatain. But I refrained from mentioning the second book, so that because really it's simply they are published one after the other. These are books 22 and 23 of the Revival of the Islamic Sciences, the Religious Sciences by Hiyaruddin. So, summary of the present work: the book of disciplining the soul, refining the character, and curing the sickness of the heart. Ghazali opens with some general remarks on the importance of purifying the soul from bad character traits, which are a sure path to perdition, quote unquote. An exposition of the merit, which is having good character, and condemnation of bad character. So now we're starting the summary. Following his usual practice in the Ihya, Ghazali begins with a collection of passages relevant to his theme, called from the Quran, the Hadith, and the dicta of the first Muslims. Al-Athar. Number 2, an exposition of the time of the true nature of good and bad character. Ghazali now suggests that the mainstream ulama of his day have contented themselves with praising and enumerating the virtues without analyzing the true nature, haqiqa, of good character. I would add that Al-Ghazali had a problem with the ulama who simply took interest in the knowledge itself without implementing the knowledge in their own lives. In fact, he would, at the very beginning of the Ihya, he would say that his time was devoid of the true ulama, almost becoming technocrats, if you will. And he said they were those who were interested in the positions, in the jobs, and those who were interested also in laying their hands on the money of other people, such as the orphans. We continue reading. He then proceeds to offer such an analysis, basing himself on the tradition of philosophical ethics, and particularly on chapter 1 of Miskawayh's refinement of character, but without mentioning either the word philosophy or the names of philosophers, lest this alienates some of his readers, recalling the commonplace Muslim juxtaposition of khalq, creation, outwardly created form, and khuluq, inner character trait. He reproduces Miskawayh's verdict, itself drawn from Galen, that a trait of character is a firmly established condition, hay'a of the soul, from which actions proceed easily without any need for thinking or forethought. But he differs from the Greeks in asserting that good deeds are those which are recognized as such, not only by the intellect, but by the revealed law, the Shara, as well. Khalq and khuluq, we should make mention of a supplication that is intrinsic, really, and it does reflect the Islamic worldview in this case. Whether you look in the mirror or not, but since we do look in the mirror, you would make the dua, Allahumma kama hasanta khalqi fahassin khuluqi. So you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in as much as He beautified your outer form, your creation, your khalq, you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also to beautify your character, your khuluq, your ethics, your mannerism, your behavior. And both in Arabic have the same form, the words khalq and khuluq. The three, the root of both words is identical, which is an amazing thing, really, as if the khuluq is also entrenched in the notion of khalq. One might introduce the notion of ma'dan, It'll be difficult without having the background, the linguistic background, because in general it is used معدن and معادن, a reference to minerals in the ground. That precisely they have been categorized as معادن because they have stayed in the ground for a long time. Uh, how does this apply to character? If the trait, if the trait has been inculcated inside you for a long time, then it becomes your madden, your almost like um you are not born with it, but almost it becomes innate. We continue reading. A man is only virtuous when all his traits are pure. Al-Ghazali now introduces the four Platonic virtues: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice, and briefly explains how these are conditioned by the three faculties of the soul: the rational, irascible, and appetitive, basing his discussion with various amendments on Miskaway. Each of the four cardinal virtues should be in equilibrium, اعتدال, which will result in the generation of a range of secondary virtues. For instance, when the intellect is balanced, it will bring forth the rational virtues, such as deliberative excellence. When unbalanced in the direction of excesses, ifrat, because really the virtue is between excess ifrat and deficiency tafrit. So al-fadila is always between ifrat and tafrit, not in all cases, such as in justice. When unbalanced in the direction of excess, ifrat, it yields vices such as cunning and deception. And when unbalanced in the direction of defect, tafrit, deficiency, other vices like stupidity and heedlessness will result. Virtue is defined in Aristotelian terms as a mean equidistant between two extremes. Al-Ghazali finishes the section by explaining that only the Prophet ﷺ attained complete equilibrium in this regard. Number three, an exposition of the exposition of the susceptibility of the traits of character to change through discipline. Although the Islamic tradition was founded on the belief that character traits can be reformed, a judgment supported by the Quran and on the basis of Aristotle by most philosophers, an opinion was apparently current, which held that character is innate and cannot be changed. One could argue theologically and also based on the Quran itself, based on the Sunnah, that really what the message of Islam, what the Quran did, what the Sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ, what he did, it was changing the character of the companions. It was very transformative. Think about the pre-Islamic Arabs, the things that they used to do in Arabia, femicide, so burying the girls alive. There were good things that they did. In general, they were very hospitable. They were very. They would say the truth. So lying was not really one of the things that circulated in pre-Islamic Arabia, but in terms of behavior, so people were, let's say, the status of women, how they were transformed immediately, kind of overnight, really. And they started participating in public debates, if you will, public affairs in the mosque, they having their own property, independent financial identity, etc. Oh, and one can point to the character of specific companions, how they have changed dramatically. At any rate, we continue reading and see. Drawing on Miskawi, Ghazali briefly summarizes the debate on the mutability of character, concluding that this is both possible and necessary. There are some traits which are innate and unchanging, he concedes, but many others which are a proper object of self scrutiny and control. Miskawi had presented the Stoic view of mankind as being innately good, but subsequently corrupted by society, contrasted it with the contrary view of man's inherent evil, and then cited Galen to show that among men a minority are born virtuous, while the remainder may, in most cases, be reformed through pious counsels and keeping the company of good men. Miskawe then settles differentiation between people who are easily reformed and those who are improved only with difficulty or not at all. And this is echoed by Ghazali, who distinguishes four types of human being in this regard. Ghazali then shows that the purpose of discipline is not to extirpate anger and desire, but simply to redirect them towards a condition of just balance. One might think of the Quranic verse, وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ. You suppress anger. You are not required to. If you could basically, you could, in terms of the personal rights, you could reach a stage where you would voluntarily give up, like you will be very forgiving. Let's say, for example, there's this Iraqi old professor of law at the International Islamic University when I was there between 93 and 96. There was a car accident. He was driving a double-stroke motorcycle, hit him, rear-ended him, and obviously in all countries it's the fault of the one behind. So it's the driver of that motorcycle. What he did, that professor, there was some damage to the car, some damage to the motorcycle. What he did is that he did suppress his anger. وَالْقَاضِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. He did forgive the guy, that man. So I did not ask him for insurance or to to repair whatever damage took place to the car. Wallahu yuhibbul muhsinin. What he did is that he gave money to that man who rear-ended him to fix his motorcycle. The double-stroke motorcycle is the transportation of the poor in general, and without that motorcycle, his life would become definitely difficult to manage. So yes, that's one could depart, like the root could be directly in the Quranic verses or the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The paragraph ends with the mentioning that Several Quranic passages are adduced to justify this doctrine, together with the famous hadith, "The best of affairs is the middle course." خير الأمور أوسطها أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Finally, Ghazali mentions the Sheikh, the spiritual master, to whose guidance the aspirant should submit, explaining that the Sheikh must use the strategy of compelling his disciple to aim for the opposite of his vices, not because this is the true end of the spiritual path, but because only this will give him sufficient energy to overcome his ugly traits and attain to the golden mean. Inshallah, we'll continue with number 4 and the other, the rest of the summary in the next session, inshallah. Until then, subhanakallah wa hamdik. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.